ordinary council meeting, and just read the council prayer. We ask that through council's discussions and decisions, the representatives we have elected may govern the Far North District with imagination, skill and wisdom to achieve a fairer and more united community that enhances the well-being of our district and solves the district's problems efficiently and effectively. Amen. Can I just congratulate Rachel on the speed in which you ran your meeting.
It was a collective effort.
I just want everyone collectively to note how quick it can happen. And I have the same expectation for this meeting. The only problem is that David King just reminded me it depends on the chair, of course, which I thought. Anyway, welcome to the meeting. We have a couple of presentations. We have Danny Simmons, who's going to talk to us about heritage. And then we've got a presentation from Andy Far North Holdings. And then when that's finished, I intend to change the agenda and bring forward the item relating to the item on the supplementary agenda of Far North Holdings, so we can have that discussion. Yeah. All right, folks, well, thank you very much. And Danny, the floor is yours for 10 minutes, please. Not 45 minutes like you suggested this morning.
Will I try? John, thank you very much for inviting me to be here, and thank you all for allowing me to speak to you. Speaking with John every week on the Zoom meetings he has with the various chairs of the different communities, I'm aware of some of the things that you're faced with, and some really big issues coming up with you. And so I'm sure you want to do the live. Anyway, there's a map on the wall there, and that is a map of Wanganui, a part of the area that is intended to be included in the heritage zone. And if you look at it, you see that there are some purple dots, actually heritage buildings, and then there's a purple line. And if you go around that purple line, inside it, you'll see there's a lot of sections marked. You can see the outline in there. And if you count those up as I do, and you don't get too cross-eyed, you'll find something over 200 sections in there. So it's encompassing a very big area. Up to the top of that outer site is the Rangitoga Peninsula, where Butler Point is, and there's 120 acres of farmland, which has no heritage buildings on it, and which has no notable sites on it, that's been encompassed as well. So we have a fairly broad brush approach here. Wanganui is an iconic fishing village waterfront. There are buildings from there that date from the earliest European settlement. But most of Wanganui consists of ordinary homes of 50s, 60s, and 70s in Europe. The existing precinct is along the waterfront, and the line is drawn a little up from the waterfront to include some houses. There are some individual old buildings outside that warrant protection. No one has any problem with this. But you have huge problems with the proposal shown on the map. Just 2 days before the close of submissions, not one person in the affected area had any knowledge whatsoever of what was proposed, and I only found out of it by chance. Had I not, no one of those residents would know even now. So, however carefully constructed and complex the consultation process may have been regarding the Wanganui Heritage Precinct proposal, it was a total failure. In the face of this failure, Cheryl Bainbridge, Te Huka Community Board member, and I approached council planning staff and asked them to call a public meeting in Wanganui to inform residents. The staff declined. So we called one. Around 65 residents turned up. And I presented the information laid out in the PowerPoint I sent to you all. Yesterday I emailed you a PowerPoint presentation. If you go through that, that is what we presented to the meeting in Wanganui. I don't have time to present that here, so you just have to look it up for yourselves. Following that presentation, a resolution was passed unanimously and by acclamation. Now I have that resolution in front of me. I'll come back to it later if I have time. But the resolution was passed. And here we carry on the front page. The council has proposed extending the Monaghan Heritage Precinct from the area along the waterfront to a much larger area which includes over 200 ordinary homes of all sorts. This was never the intent of heritage protection. This should only be applied to actual heritage buildings or sites. Following the development of the draft plan, notification is the next step. And I've been told that many times by your planners. But it's supposed to be followed by further consultation. But, and this is a very big but in capital letters, Rule 86B in the RMA says, a rule in a proposed plan has immediate legal effect if the rule protects historic heritage. For the purposes of subsection 3, immediate legal effect means legal effect on and from the date on which the proposed plan containing the rule is publicly notified. Since the rule will have immediate legal effect as soon as it's notified, any changes after that will have to be argued in court with huge legal costs. The council have ratepayers money to pay lawyers. We, the public, only have our own money. Because of this, it is imperative that this proposal be withdrawn before it is notified and totally rewritten to include only actual heritage properties. We get soothing noises made of this. Oh, look, wait till it's notified, and then the process allows to make submissions, and then we can make alterations and so on and so forth. But once it gets to notification, we are going to have some huge hurdles. It makes far more sense to sort it out before we get there, because it's obviously cutting right across what your locals want. So it's sort of before we get there, not afterwards, because it's just going to make life so much harder for everyone. To allow to proceed to notification in its current form is totally unacceptable. The Local Government Act states that the purpose of local government is to enable democratic local decision making and action by and on behalf of communities. That's what you're here for, folks. Part 3, district-wide provision rules in your own operative plan states, the council will ensure that before seeking to include within the plan any heritage resource that occurs on private land, consultation will be undertaken with the landowners affected. Council have not done that. Rule 12 is there for a very good reason. Entering freehold property, particularly non-heritage property, into a heritage precinct carries with it extremely onerous conditions that impinge on property rights. Therefore, individual communication is required. People have owned and bought property with no idea this rule was going to be imposed. Heritage resources can be and are protected by individual identification, even if they are not encompassed in the heritage precinct. If you take that purple line, you'll see that most of the buildings there are not heritage. There's no reason at all why it couldn't be just along the waterfront pretty well as it is, and then you just pick out the individual heritage items that need to be protected and protect them. They don't have to go line around the whole line. There are onerous and frankly unacceptable conditions that will be applied to some 200 non-heritage properties encompassed by the new area. The rules show that the building of a new home visible from a public space will become all but impossible, and even simple additions or alterations to existing buildings will need expensive planning processes and controls. This makes no sense. Rightly, it is said that Monaghan is a special place. However, it has maintained that character over generations without onerous rules. Apart from the waterfront, if anyone here thinks they care about Monaghan, you've got no idea how much we care about it. Apart from the waterfront, there are a few old heritage-type buildings scattered cheek by jowl with a wide variety and large numbers of ordinary houses. These are interspersed with some new and modern designs. It works. Monaghan retains its character, and there's no good reason to expect it will not continue to do so. Contributing is the already heritage-protected large rain cavity reserve. It has been cared for and developed by enthusiastic and committed volunteers in the Friends of Rain Cavity Group. Across the harbour is a magnificent Butler Point, covered in ancient Purakawa.
Danny, one more minute.
Doing well. We're calling on council to discard this faulty proposal and develop a new one which encompasses only actual heritage resources. And then take this new development document to the individuals affected as your operative plan requires. To do otherwise would put costly planning and consent obligations on owners of ordinary homes if they want to do anything. To continue with the current proposal would cause anger and conflict and impose costs to no good purpose. I'm here today representing Whanganui residents living in their ordinary homes of all ages, shapes and sizes. I'm speaking for the little people who live in these ordinary homes, many of whom are retired and on fixed incomes, who simply cannot afford the costs that will come to this proposal. Remember, Whanganui is what it is because we care for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much for that presentation. And,
There is the resolution that we put to that public meeting is in the PowerPoint presentation I sent to you, so you can look it up and find it. It's also in this document, and you'll get this document in minutes, so you can see the detail of that resolution. Thank you, John.
Thank you for your presentation and your interest. We appreciate that. And can I also say that Sean is organising for staff or staff representatives plus heritage people who are involved with the plan to come and discuss with you on site. So
that would be great.
That's underway. Thank you, Sean, for doing that. Just before I move on, I just want to acknowledge that we've got representatives of Untitled Holdings and so on. Just before I do that, I want to just advise people Mike Edmonds is online. Hello, Mike, welcome. And also, it's Belinda can't make it today, so Frank Owen has come along to represent the Eastern Ward of Bay of Islands Whangaroa Ward. Thank you. And he's doing it. You need to understand this guy is giving up an amazing day to be here. He turned 37 today. It's his birthday. And so thank you very much for giving your birthday up. Of course, you could consider this a birthday treat, I guess. But, well,
thank you.
Thank you. And feel free.
Can I have the age in writing, please?
John, if you'll excuse me, I'll go back to work. Thank you very much.
Andy, all the best. Thank you. Okay, so thank you, folks. Now, I just want to, given that we have Andy and the representatives here from Far North Holdings, I first of all just want to say, hello, Susan. That's not what I wanted to say, but your timing was perfect. Can I just say, first of all, thank you for the tour that you conducted down at the industrial park. The majority of us were present, and I've got to say, outstanding. And I would like to think that somehow or another we can keep the community informed, not just here in Kaikohe, because this will have implications across the Mid-North, across our district and across the region and indeed across New Zealand. So it's spectacular already, and it's only been going about 2 minutes or however long it is. And so you guys should be congratulated for the work and the foresight and the way in which you've got that established. And for anyone who hasn't been, I'm sure that Andy and so on will be pleased to give you a conducted tour. Rachel has made a suggestion that we gather again in 3 months to see the how much what extra has been done in that time, and I've got to say I support that. I think that's a fabulous idea that we keep an eye on it, because it's one of the things I don't think we do enough as a council is actually pat ourselves on the back. And while this may be a Far North Holdings project, of course Far North Holdings are part of us and the work that's been done. We do many successful projects. This one's an outstanding one, no question. In fact, you got New Zealand-wide recognition just recently, Andy, I understand, as a consequence of this. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that today, and thank you for taking that. What I'd like to do is just change the order of the agenda and ask Andy to come and make his presentation, or the staff, whoever it is, Erwin or Chris, make the presentation, and then I intend to take the item on 6.5, and that's been, when Andy's made his presentation, so that we dealt with it, and then Andy, of course, you're welcome to leave it if you wish to do so. So thank you once again. The floor is yours.
I'll just finish off with just one thing on the innovation part, because one really important piece of information I didn't actually put out there was a number of people obviously asked us the question, look, it's fruit picking, it's low paid work. It actually isn't, because the way the fruit picking is done is actually also based on how much is picked, how much is packed, and the profitability of the business. So the average wage in Mangatakere is actually around $35 to $40. So it is not insignificant in terms of the hourly rate that can be actually achieved, as well as the actual training they do in terms of developing staff and succession planning. So really
Okay,
good
it wasn't being the bloody me. Can I get a job?
So, Paihia Waterfront, obviously it's been gathered quite a lot of community commentary of late, so we thought we would bring this back to councillors. It is a project which, while FNHL helps secure funding through the Crown infrastructure funding, it's not a project we specifically benefit from. There's no commercial benefit or otherwise to us. But it is seen as quite a key piece of infrastructure to buy here going forward, and council have a significant sum of money set aside in the LTP that goes towards the project. So here are a few images as to why it was even envisaged in the first place. Some of you may... Thank you.
Now it is.
There we go. Some of you may recognise these images. Where do I need to point this? Oh, IT. Okay, I'm okay with developing the site, but not IT. So these, like I said, for those in Paihia, you'll be familiar. The storm damage that has occurred in past years, and not too past either, 96, 97, quite significant erosion and damage to the foreshore, and then subsequent impact on businesses, their turnover, and just day-to-day running of the town and the actual services that run underneath the road. Not so much damage in 2001, but then a few months later, subsequent damage occurs. 2014, so you can see it's reasonably frequent. It's not something which is just an ad hoc every 10 years. It's a regular occurrence. We're primarily impacted by is it a northerly, northwesterly? Easterly, for example, that came through recently. It didn't cause much damage because of the direction of the actual swell and movement. So while it created a little bit of overflow across the road and some flooding, it wasn't as significant if it had been in the other direction. So it's due to directional effect, climatic change, seasonal rise, storm surge. It will be an ongoing occurrence, and so we can't avoid that. This is just obviously some minor impact around the wharf structure, but again, it's still nonetheless inconvenient to local business, potentially dangerous if we don't come across it before some person actually falls through or gets damaged or impacted by it. So we just did a quick estimation of, conservative estimation of cost, and it's $1 million. You've probably seen your papers. We've said if we extrapolated that over a 20-year period, and that's a conservative, we're not taking into account the major implications, you're looking at a 3 million plus over a 20-year period. So you could say that might be significant, but that's assuming, we can't predict what will or won't happen, because we don't know how often storms are going to come through, whether they are going to be more frequent, whether storm swells are going to come more from the northwesterly. So really it is a bit of putting your finger in the air, but you've seen the impact it has had through those images and the financial business impact it's had as well. This was the consented plan back in 2011, which had the northern outer breakwater, the other outer western breakwaters. There was a reclamation area proposed in front of the maritime building, and then the eastern attenuator for the marina just here. What is now proposed is, firstly, and this is what we put out to the public to make sure that we removed it from FNHL, because we're not building any additional marina berths. We said, right, straight away, that is not proceeding. We're not getting any commercial benefit. If anything is required in the future in terms of additional charter or recreational berth space, we will go through the normal public consultation process and everybody can comment. But right now, that is completely removed off the table to avoid any of miscommunication or that conversation getting directed in an appropriate area. Secondly, this is obviously reflects just what we've got now following the recent PGF extension to the wharf. And what we're also not doing is the reclamation area here. So it's consented to put reclamation in here, and we have consent for 2 commercial buildings. What we're proposing is there is no reclamation. Unless the community actually wanted us to do the reclamation and we're looking to fundraising, we wouldn't do it. It's capital intensive. It doesn't warrant commercial intervention, but if the community felt, like Focus Pie here did on the green area outside, that it would be good to have more green space, more outdoor space, then that is their choice. But it's not something that we are intending to deliver and is not part of this project. So just so that everybody's clear, there's no additional berth space and there's no reclamation taking part. So this is effectively the work that is now being undertaken. PGF, or Crown Infrastructure, are funding the outer breakwaters and the groin and abutment areas. And then council are also contributing to those groin and abutments, plus the beach structure as well. And then you've got some dredging of the new navigation channel, which would then take place along here, because you'd have a new navigation channel around the outer island. So what does it look like? Well, I suppose one of the initial issues was that we actually had some very historic engineering diagrams and consented plans, which we had to go back and validate to make sure that all the evidence that had been produced was actually still applicable. So all the Met Ocean survey data had to be reviewed, all the engineering work around the actual breakwaters had to be reviewed, and so our starting point was the consent we were looking at would be as originally approved. Now, I'll just go to the next slide and I'll come back to this one. So the consent that was originally approved allowed for a 4-metre high breakwater, which is obviously very significant. So one of the issues that came straight to the surface is huge visual impediment, and we completely understand that. So we've actually been working quite extensively with Beckers and the other engineers in our design team over quite a significant period of time to understand what we can do to actually alleviate that while still achieving the same outcomes. And so this is why you're actually getting the first cut of this today. Okay, because we're aiming to produce this at the 7th of July meeting at the Mural. And so we were basically trying to push ourselves to say, what could we do to reduce the height of the breakwater and that visual impediment? And what we've actually managed to do is actually reduce it from that 4 metres down to 1.2, 800 above the medium low water. So that means over 50% of the day you see nothing. The rest of the day you're seeing a variation between that and that. So if I now go back to the other slide, that was based on a mean low water, 2.6, Chris? Yep. What you're actually going to see, that is the actual natural reef there, this little one, that round little one. That's 1.4. So imagine that now coming across. You can't really see it. It's going to be very, from a distance, pretty much non-existent. and you're not going to see it for over 50% of the time. So this was really just to give you an idea as to visual impact. 2.6, you've got a bit of a visual intrusion. The 1.4, which actually sits alongside it, we're actually below that one there. So very little in terms of visual impediment. I'll pass these things one area. What we've also got on the bluff is we're actually doing a created rock effect. So again, visually, it looks natural and part of the natural landscape. So again, that's what you're going to see. So we've made some significant steps to take on board what would be a concern of me if I lived in Paihia, is what does it look like? Yes, I can see the perceived benefits. I understand what the perceived benefits are, but what is the impact from me from a visual perspective? And we've actually significantly reduced those going forward. So go forward. How have we done that? Well, what we've done is actually, with the engineers, we're actually using the beach to act as the additional buffer, using the friction and height of the actual beach itself to reduce the flow of the sea and the impact of the sea swell coming across. So the first step is the reduced breakwater height takes out a big chunk, and then an increased length and height of beach kills the flow of the sea water before it actually even reaches the road itself. So we actually stop it prior to it overcoming the top of the beach area. So it's taken a bit of calculation to do that, but it's allowed us to actually come up with a solution which we think addresses pretty much the majority of concerns that have been raised today. So, objective was obviously protecting infrastructure, land-based and marine. Now the marine structure on this is still impacted because the marine infrastructure in terms of the actual wharf benefits more from a higher breakwater because you've still got a wave coming through which the beach stops but doesn't benefit the actual wharf itself. But then the wharf is designed to accommodate fairly extreme events. But for example, ferries would still be limited in certain times because you need a slightly higher breakwater to take more of the water out of the chop environment you get around the wharf. The obviously community space around the beach, you've now got quite a significant wide and high beach area to create green open space, walkways, cycleways, and a great recreational environment for the local community first, the tourism. It will significantly improve that aspect of Paihia full stop. Ecology, obviously, one of the things is the boulders we're dropping in will create natural habitat for marine vertebrates, and potentially there's opportunity for education and environmental opportunities around that. Existing resource consents already cover a number of issues such as pest management, landscape assessment, foreshore monitoring. So there are a lot of stringent requirements around developing anything in the water as you'd expect. So going forward, we think we've come up with a really good solution that's been interrogated and is now going through a final design process, subject to council still feeling that this is a key core piece of infrastructure that we need to follow through on your behalf, and that the LTP provision set aside because now the beach is quite a critical part of that infrastructure that has allowed us to alleviate the breakwater height and impact in terms of its visual appearance. So that's really up to date. It's still a work in progress. They don't hold us exactly to the 1.2 or 800 above mean low water because every rock's going to be a different height. So I don't want some people going out there and measuring it saying this one's 1.3 meters instead of 1.2. There will be some slight variation in that, but it will be designed to create the most natural effect possible and to actually achieve what we've been tasked to do through the PGF. So I think that's a quick summation. So if there's any questions, Chris is here to answer any of the technical stuff, and Erwin's obviously been working through the community and so forth.
Thank you, Andy, for that presentation. And can I just ask a question? I was in Russell last weekend, and I was told by an elderly lady there that there was a time when you could walk at low tide from the beach to the island. And she talked about the fact that there was a natural breakwater, if you like, and that had been removed. And when she reminded me, I remembered it, actually. I don't think I tripped over it, but I certainly do recall it. So basically, what you're just telling us now is we're going to put back what was there that was, I think, blasted out at some stage, but I don't know whether anyone can comment on that.
Just in reference to that, I mean, you can look at some of the old Admiralty survey plans for the areas of the old soundings, and right through to 1934, right into 1950, basically, it shows that shoal that came through. But yes, over time, it's disappeared, a little bit like the beach. Part of it's a natural process, but there was some intervention at some point. But everyone does recall that that shoal that came across from the existing beach out to Low.
Thank you. Has anyone else got any questions? David's got one, and then Rachel.
Yeah, thanks. And you mentioned at Ora Tutu and Te there'll be some requirement for foreshore monitoring. What will be the nature of that? What will we be looking for, and who will do that monitoring?
Thank you, Councillor Fenton. That's the responsibility for the monitoring will be with Holdings. We started the original design of that monitoring in 2011 through 2013. So we've got some baseline monitoring of T Beach. As you know, T Beach has got a natural process occurring with it now, which is obviously the effects of that are known probably to most of you in terms of the erosion that's occurring there. But we'll be monitoring both sites and looking at the relationship between the two, and we'll be reporting on that every 2 years.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you guys for coming in, doing that presentation. It was really informative. I note on page 7, one of the bottom lines, and excuse me, this first-term councillor, so this may be historic information. The issue of asset ownership and maintenance obligations still needs to be resolved. I was just wondering if there was any commentary you could share around that for me.
I mean, it's a water-based asset. The beach is obviously something you're putting in that's going to be reserved naturally, so we would assume that would be part of this foreshore reserve. It's not something we can physically own. So ownership, I think, more related initially to the reclamation, if that was going to be developed by community to ensure it was kept as reserve going to council. I think in this case, do you have any comments there, Chris?
No, other than we've obviously made a submission to the LTP to represent future maintenance requirements. So we had put in year 26, 27, a sum of, I think it was 200,000 for any remedial work that needed to happen in that 5 to 6 years period. That's very much an estimate based on what we know has been occurring in beach remediation processes in Auckland, Taurimarama, Mission Bay. But we've found it's been a lot less in those environments. At the end of the day, some of the remediation related to formed beaches has been simply moving 100 cubes of sand from one end to the other. So it's relatively low level intervention, and that's the sort of anticipated maintenance that we'd have, simply just moving sand from one place to another. In terms of maintenance, in terms of the foreshore promenade, obviously the council would need to be informed under community facilities maintenance plans.
Thank you. Can I have one further question, please? Thank you. We've been doing a lot of learning around coastal erosion mitigation and national policy statements and all of those planning terms. My question is, does this qualify, because this is still not clear in my head, is this soft mitigation or is this hard mitigation?
I would have thought it's soft because it's sand.
That is my interpretation also. But
I mean, your alternative is you start putting loads of rock and just keep pushing out rock and build it up, and which, you know, your beach disappears, you end up with a lot of rock there. That's what I would classify as hard mitigation.
It's soft until you put some lime in it.
Yeah.
Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for coming along today and for the presentation. As an 8-term councillor, I've been involved in this for a very, very long time, so I do understand. Been with those a very long time, and what is not clear to me is the reason for lowering the height. I just would like some commentary around that, please, because you did say, well, this will protect the road and the beach and the public foreshore. It won't provide the necessary protection for the maritime assets. And I'm just wondering what the rationale for that is, please.
Right. So there's two ways we can look at this, and we can increase the height slightly. This was us trying to say, right, looking at impact and, I said, taking on board community iwi commentary. And like I said, how significant that is, we don't know. But what we're doing is we're actually developing a rock breakwater which is future-proof. So in other words, we've designed it so we could actually add, we can add a sea level rise, and we can add, if we find there's benefit to add to it, layer by layer, to significantly improve outcomes. So what it is, it's a future-proof scenario, which allows us to add layers if we need to over time, depending on what the impacts are. So it's not a situation where we're putting it in and that's it, we can't make any future changes. The whole idea is it allows us to potentially do step by step and get the absolute perfect balance for us going forward. You could go in there straight away and say, right, we've got a consent for 3.6 metre high, we're just going to build 3.6 metre high. And that will give you, 100% dead still water, but you've got a 3.6 metre breakwater you need to view. So yes, if the preference is just go and build the 3.6 metre straight away, happy to do it.
Ancillary question, Your Worship, what happens to the consent? Do you keep that live in case that additional work is required at some point in the future, or does the resource consent lapse at that point and you have to go back and apply for a new one? How does that work in theory?
Chris, how would that work? If we did the 1.2 and then added to it over time with sea level rise, would that be just a variation to the existing consent in terms of, because I don't know the conditions in there specific to incremental increase.
Yeah, the marine, a hard and regulated structure, but like regulations in perpetuity. So the activity consent goes through to 20. We'd have to check, but I couldn't say categorically that we wouldn't have to vary the consent for a staged approach to the breakwaters. I'd have to come back to you on that one.
Thank you.
Okay, if you can find out, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. You have done a lot of work. I appreciate that, and I like the new design. But just some questions. So you've got consent. I take it the modelling has been done in terms of the sand movement on the beach. I think.
Yeah.
So that it's not going to be a major maintenance task.
Yeah, correct. So the modelling of the sand has been done from everything from particle size to weight, and then obviously the groins on the east and western side, which actually effectively encompass it and wrap around those, so that while, as Chris identified, you might get some movement side to side, effectively it's encompassed between those two groins, and therefore you're just moving it from A to B. But the particle size based on that means that it's not going to move. It might go out occasionally, come back in, but you're not going to lose the beach per se.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Kelly.
The western abutment, so that's the one at that end of the beach. Are we going to include some work to strengthen the, prevent more erosion that's been happening, from the playground towards the bluff? There's erosion that happens there. Or has the study shown that the western abutment is going to assist with mitigating erosion? There as well.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
In the picture, the western abutment is closer to the.
Yeah. So you're thinking on the other side of the bluff. Yeah. That will actually capture more, won't it? Our view is, if anything, that will actually end up with more deposition around that area, rather than currently you've got erosion taking place.
Oh, yeah, so.
If anything, it would actually
Yeah.
improve the outcomes there.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Andy, for your submission, and Chris, thank you very much. So I will now ask you to turn to page 6.5 on the supplementary agenda, and I will move the recommendation. Do I have a second, please? Thank you, Councillor Court. It's open for discussion. I don't intend to speak to it. It's six.
Can I ask
Speaks for
that
itself.
we take the points individually?
We can take them individually if you wish.
Are you going to vote?
Happy to vote for them individually. Does anyone want to comment on them?
Well, point A,
There you go, please.
it says, you're talking about noting the statement of intent, and yes, we need to do that, but I'm just a little bit concerned that it's put in this context and it doesn't actually relate to this context.
Statement of intent does. That may be your view, but that's not correct.
The statement of intent is order, that's all. So, and that's meant for the committee
And we've got a discussion coming up on it, John.
Right. So, yeah, so that's one thing. So that's my point on point A.
Okay. Anyone got any other questions on any of the 4 points?
My question is around the project seawalls, and I don't know if Rachel asked it, depreciation. Do we know if this asset has to be depreciated?
Janice? Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
And so it'll just be the component that we're paying for that would be depreciated, or are we going to be depreciating the seawalls as well?
I think it depends on final ownership. I'm not clear on which bits the PGF pay for and whether they're actually assets that we could capitalise.
The PGF is paying effectively for the rock outer breakwaters, and so councillor is there for the beach and the groin. So that's effectively, I suppose, a reserve or coastal frontage area which would reside in the council.
Did you help you, Kelly?
Yep. And my further question, was around after the meeting that happens at the marae, where to then? What? I guess it depends on the outcome there, but what are you hoping?
Well, we're hoping, obviously, having seen that we've taken on board a lot of the commentary, we've done as much as we can in terms of, in terms of mitigating the various concerns that have arisen. There's obviously a balance of there's a fairly large amount of support, and we've obviously got those that are against, and some voices which will never change.
Yep.
And then it's just simply a matter of it's core infrastructure. We need to move forward with it. We've got an expectation through PGF that we're delivering the project within the time frame. If we've done our best to mitigate all the issues, which we feel we're getting close to that point, it's simply a matter of is it time now to move forward with the support of council, in which case we'll just carry on.
Thank you, Andy. And then I'll be less than 5 minutes. So I just, carrying on from what Councillor Busick raised, the A says that we note the routine review of the Farnell Holdings Limited statement of intent, which was considered at the ARC committee meeting, and I voted against that because of the process that it went through that lacked us being able to engage in that, so I am voting against that again. But I'm going to vote in support of the seawalls because there has been some work to listen to the community, and they've shifted from what was originally proposed. So dropping the, what do they call it? The marina, swear word, and the eastern attenuator, that's big. The things that I think you need to ensure are mitigated are the pest protection for the island, which is owned by DOC but has strong affiliation to a number of hapu at both islands, and then making sure that beaches that might just look like a crusty old beach, you know, the one by the helipad. I walk my dog there, you know, it's a beach. It's hardly anyone goes there. We love it the way it is. So just leave it alone.
Sounds like a crusty old beer.
And I know that this is not a popular thing for you guys, but we've got water pipes along that state highway, and that's critical infrastructure that I have at front of mind with these seawalls. Also, dining at one of the restaurants on the wharf, when you're there at night and, you know, there's big waves, you're like, there's a roof, but you're getting rained on. Hopefully the seawall can help with that as well. You know, attractive places, we need to put the supporting infrastructure in place. And I'm sorry to the Kelly Stratford fans that don't support that decision, but I'm thinking, I'm going to steal Rachel's word, look upon a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Good man. Thanks. Just a comment to that.
Sure.
Just one thing, just so you are aware, Kelly, just to add to it, that as part of the process going forward, we actually outlined a fairly significant public promotion and question and answer document, plus 3D visuals, so that the community are aware and it gets rid of all the miscommunication and misinformation that's been perpetuated.
Yeah.
So that would be released shortly afterwards, and we'd obviously continue the engagement with the community and iwi in terms of, like you said, the environmental and all other associated issues with the project. That would be an ongoing process.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Rachel, and then Moko.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to start off by acknowledging that we received the petitions last week, and just acknowledge those again. I also wanted to really pay respect to the high level of community interest that this project has triggered and continues to trigger, and the amount of pain that does go with that, and really reiterate that we do hear and feel that pain at the table. As Councillor Stratford has pointed out, I really want to acknowledge the fact that you guys have been ears wide open, and we can see that today. We need to celebrate that more, and I wanted to thank you for that. I look forward to attending that meeting on the 7th of July and seeing how that goes, and really, really appreciate you coming here today to not only share the mahi with us, but to share it with the wider community as well, because that's what this is about. I'm going to keep it brief though. So there were 3 things that I wanted to point out today. Was one, we've recently considered a report around Freeze Park to protect our infrastructure and the mitigation work that needs to go with that. We've also got a report today that is asking us to support the protection of private infrastructure in the same manner, and that's what this is today. As Councillor Stratford has pointed out, this is our infrastructure, it's our community's future, and I'm also going to use the phrase because I'm trying to use it as much as possible, but this is about making long-term decisions. This is about being good ancestors, even when sometimes that hurts, and this is the Mokopuna decision today. So as much as I know that it has caused a lot of pain, and it is not a comfortable statement to make at this table, I will be in support of this today. Thank you.
And can I just make the point, Rachel, thank you for those comments, that we've just been down to the industrial park because of that same thing. Moko, you wanted to make a comment?
Sure, thank you, Mikara. So the Provincial Growth Fund is paying for the western, northern and the dredging of the channel, the western and northern breakwaters and the dredging of the channel. And we have committed funding in our LTP for the eastern breakwater, Horotutu Beach replenishment and the Promenade Foreshore Park development. When the plans changed there, that didn't require, were those plans changed before the PDF funding, or before we went out to get funding, so we didn't have to go back and say, actually, we've changed it. Are you still happy to fund this?
No, we're not. All we're doing is a variation on a theme, so the breakwaters are still doing their job. It's still combined. If, for example, the council said we're not going to fund the beach, I would have a problem because that's now part of the breakwater balance. That would be a problem because then it wouldn't work. It's the two combined which have the overall effect. But Otherwise, we can still do it within the budget and within the programme and within the PGF parameters.
Now that the reclamation isn't happening, what are you going to do with the dredging? Thing up?
It'll be what we normally do with dredging. It goes to dredge disposal sites. We normally have to do not annual dredging, but dredging around just purely for the vehicular access, such as the Russell Ferry and the charter vessels that operate off there, just to maintain the depth they need to operate in and around the port. So it'll be that exactly the same.
Yeah, good, thank you. David?
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, the couple of members have expressed concern about item A. Is the intention of that simply to state that there was a review conducted by the committee, just as a matter of fact, or is it about acknowledging the content? I found it quite innocuous. I'm just puzzled as to why there's concern about it.
I think it's mainly to state that that the Far North Holdings have an annual thing, yeah, and we're just acknowledging that. At the end of the day, we've got a choice. We can either direct them, in which case then we fire them and do it ourselves, or we stay as we are.
Yeah, so would it be easier if the wording was simply to say that we note that the SOI was reviewed and considered by the PAF committee on a certain date?
Sorry,
Would that,
I have to object, it wasn't reviewed, we didn't do options.
We are reviewing it, but anyway, I think we just leave it as it is.
We had to do it by 31st of May each year, and we missed that time.
Okay,
so sorry, just so if it's factually wrong, then it's an issue, but is there some wording that would satisfy the concerns to make it factually correct? If indeed it is, I don't know, so I don't sit on that committee.
We went through, if I may answer that, we did go through it in detail, and that's one reason I thought bringing that here was not the right context, because it's much broader. And we did respond to it, and it went back, and then it was brought forward.
It has been dealt with.
We didn't add to that, so it has been dealt with. And we are planning a workshop with elected members to go through the details. So it's been taken on board, and we're going to look at that in the light of.
in fact, Kelly asked us to set the day, John, I remember it's either July, 28th of July.
It was going to be in July, I believe, sometime. So it's not that far away.
All right, well, thank you for those comments. I'm now going to put the resolution one by one. So can you please all, those in favour of bullet point A?
Aye.
Please say aye.
Yeah, I think the context I'm in favour of it, obviously, because but just the placement of it.
Thank you. Against?
Against.
You want yours recorded, Kelly? Okay. B, all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. It's carried. C, all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. It's carried. D, all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. It's carried. I beg your pardon, what?
I abstain from D.
You'll abstain from that, okay. All right, we'll note the abstention. All right, thank you very much, folks, for that, and thank again once, Andy and team, thank you very much for your submission, and we look forward to seeing you, if we don't see you before, in 3 months' time out at the industrial park again.
Okay.
And can I suggest that you might want to take Susan with you on your way past and explain to her what's happening out there, because it seriously needs, it needs some publicity, Susan, it's wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, now we'll return to the agenda. There are no apologies. Declarations of interest we'll take as we come across them. There's just several things that I want to talk about in regard to mural announcements. So there's been discussions in the last, around next, but one of the things that I just want to say is the portfolio holder for next was Mural, and he has asked if he could step down from that with the workload he's had. I've approached David Clinton, who has advised that he would be happy to take that position, so I'm just announcing today, thank you, David, that David will take Mural's place on next. So thank you very much for that as portfolio holder.
I can go to work.
Anyway, all right, well, we'll pass a resolution at an appropriate time. Beach Board, Maddie, do you want to make any comment on the recent meeting we had at the Beach Board to do with any of the speed stuff that we've had there? I'll just quickly say it's an ongoing discussion with the Beach Board. It's a rather challenging committee to be on, Maddie, to say the least. But Maddie does a damn good job as the deputy chair. There is the issue around speeding bylaws, which we're taking our way through. And do you want to add anything more to that from the Beach Board, Maddie?
Not really. We're just looking at the speed. It's on 90 Mile Beach. I think that's going to be administered through council. Army Purpose brought up a good point the other day. We're looking at a 12 mile from the high tide out to sea in regard to trawl fishing, which we're going to fight for. I think that's a great thing to do. And both the mayor and I always look forward to seeing all iwi there, but it doesn't happen. Quite sadly, to see the whole 4 iwi sitting there with us, it's just so rare, and it's quite sad to be honest. But apart from that, no, everything's good.
Thank you, Maddie. Maddie, do you want to also comment on the Kaimea? You and Felicity and Sean Wheaton had a visit there recently, and you wanted to
The
make...
Kaimea, Sean and I and Felicity, we had a meeting with the community on last Friday. Look, this Kaimea incident began on the 9th of February when there was a threat to put a gate across the road, which eventually did happen, and then it was taken away. But I noticed the strainer posts are still there, and they can hook it up whenever they like, which I don't think is going to happen. And it's just going on and on and on. 3 weeks after the complaint was made, I put a surveyor in there, the Von Stemmer, and they didn't want to do it because they said it's legal and you're just wasting ratepayers' money. I said, look, just get it done, which they did, and it's a public road. Simple as that. That still had no foundation, so we went to sports consultants. They came back with the information, legal road. It's a legal road. It's as simple as that. The complaints are coming from probably a couple of my families. They have now said that they will go to the Maori Land Court. Now, I've had dealings with the Maori Land Court over my mum's property at Ofaka. And look, it takes years, sometimes months and years. But the fact of the matter is that we've got the information there, it's a legal road, and we need to move in and move all those tyres, etc., etc. So that community can go and do their own thing in life by using that road with no threats, etc., because many of them have been threatened over the years when they drive on that road. Now, the area where the tyres are, it's so bad, there's big potholes and everything, and the grader can't do it because it's closed in. I don't know if, Sean, you went and had a look. You know, so the grader's going to sneak his way out and then grade away. And it's a public road. And what do? We're too scared to make a decision. That's what it boils down to. And now we've become a joke to that community. You know, and I get there in the meetings and everything, and I must thank you, Sean, for what you've tried to do. But, you know, I get there, I'm embarrassed. The other thing is too with Kaimea is the little village there, it's quite packed, there's a couple hundred people living there at least. And I did mention about putting speed humps on, and they are a necessity. Putting speed humps up now pretty quick. They bolt them down, away they go. Where the Maori families that were involved in this complaint, they're on the Middle Road. And we have a policy, and Anne knows that, it's 25 metres off the road, you get your dust suppression. But unfortunately, those houses are outside the 25 metre radius. So we need to tread very carefully on that one. Because, you know, we only need to do it for one and everyone else. There's a lot of metal roads in the far north, and so, well, what about us? But I think it's important. I was trying to move it, which I can't. I'm going to put it in writing for the next meeting, to have speed humps there. I did get a ring from my family on Wednesday this week to tell me that the road's falling away. So I shut out the camera and the area where it's sealed, because of the white washing of the water coming to the harbour, the actual road is starting to flood. So we've got problems there, and I need to have a look at that. But look, let's sort this the problem out. You know, as I said, it's 4 months now. We have to be bold and say no. And if the Heckers take it to the, for instance, one of the families, take it to the Mural Land Court, so be it. Let them go ahead. And if it ends up that it's on a private land or Māori land, then we have to bite the bullet and put back everything's back to what it was. But we need, you know, a lot of money's been spent on this. And yet we're just sitting like dead ducks.
Thank you, Matty, for that. I understand your intention is to move the notice of motion for the next council meeting.
Yeah, I'll do next.
And so, can I suggest, Sean, that you and Andy work to have a report in response to the notice of motion that Andy's going to move, so that we can have a discussion on his notices of motion.
But I think, John, I think we still need to move quickly now before the.
I mean, if it's something we can do,
you know, before the
now
meeting,
and then,
before the meeting regarding there's tyres and stuff.
Sure, can we ask you, Andy?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Hopefully we have that fixed before we come to notice of motion. All right. Well, thank you for that. Can I just raise 3 issues, and I hope I don't get a $2 fine in court, but I'm just going to mention the SNA issue again.
Use the swear jar.
And just make the point that this is, it's an issue that's out in local government across New Zealand. It varies depending on where the local authorities are. Where one of the reasons why I asked Danny Sims to come and talk about heritage is because the issues that he and those who are involved experiencing with heritage, it's the same for those with SNAs and indeed with coastal policy as well. And the unfortunate thing is there hasn't been sufficient consultation, and I'm getting this a lot right across the nation. I am meeting, I think in the middle of July, with a couple of ministers to talk about this again. I've had a useful discussion, I've got to say, with the ministers' staff, with the officials. They are looking to come up and visit us so that they can discuss and see on the ground what the issues are. I've also raised with them, as David Clinton suggested, the issue of funding to ensure that A, we've got sufficient resources, but also the parties, other parties who are involved also have sufficient resources. So I just wanted you to know those discussions are ongoing. You'll be familiar now because some of you, some of you sat through the webinar recently in the last day or two around the 3 waters, and I've been involved, I think, in 7 Zoom / webinars in the last 3 days, and there's a tremendous amount happening, and what I am picking up is that across New Zealand local government there is a growing concern about how the issue's being delivered by the government, so we'll just see where that goes. I can't remember now whether I think I circulated to you this morning a copy of the letter from Minister Parker about the building reforms, so that's out there, and of course we also have the Resource Management Act reforms and climate change reforms. The point is there's just a horrendous amount of action happening at the moment, and I'm struggling to keep up with it as a member of the local government New Zealand, plus also your mayor, and but I will do my very best to keep you posted as those things evolve, but I would ask you to continue keeping an interest, and one of the things that's also important is that we make sure that the public understand that these issues are happening as well. At the moment, other than the 3 waters, there's not a lot of knowledge times in the community. I must also just note that one of the things I've been deeply disappointed in is the Department of Internal Affairs advertising that they've done recently around the three waters, which is misleading. It's cost 3.6 million just to produce those ads, and quite honestly, they're not appropriate. So I just make that statement, and I'll make more statements as they come forward. Finally, you may have seen this is the future of local government paper. I don't know whether I can't, again, you'll have to remind me whether I've circulated it or not, but I would like people to take an interest in it. It really is important that we do, as all of us as elected members, take an interest in what's happening for the future of our local authorities. So that's just important. Okay, thank you very much. We'll come to the confirmation of the previous minutes. I'll so move. Do I have a second? This is on page 12. Do I have a second, please? Thank you, Councillor Musich. Is there any comment that anybody wishes to make? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. That's carried. Can I now go to 6.1? Kelly, are we in your hands on this one? Oh, I beg your pardon, Rachel, I beg your pardon. Goodness gracious me. What happened when you said we won?
Thank you, Worship. Are you asking me to move the resolution?
Well,
happy to move the recommendation. Thank you.
I'll second.
Right, moved and seconded. Do you wish to speak to it, please?
Very briefly, thank you, Worship, acknowledging that this paper has already been through the Strategy and Policy Committee. I did want to note to my fellow councillors who aren't on that committee that there was an additional part to the recommendation when we received the report, and the Strategy and Policy Committee will be receiving a further resourcing report on this at the first committee meeting of 2022. So I just wanted to indicate that that was happening. I really want to acknowledge the mahi that has gone into this piece of work, not only by our FNDC team, but also, more importantly, the support of who have done this right across the district, and also our communities who engaged in this process heavily as stakeholders. I do want to point out that our sport and rec facilities are a huge contributor to community wellbeing, and thanks in part to the PGF, we'll be significantly improving those facilities in the way that we deliver that level of service across our district over the coming months and years. However, we don't currently have the resources in-house to strategically approach the way we deliver these services, nor to fully support our communities who currently do it out there on the ground on a volunteer basis every day. So I have hope that we will change that over the next 12 months or so, acknowledging the report that Councillor Stratford has requested to the committee. So I'm in full support of Council receiving this recommendation and supporting in principle to allow us to approach it more sensibly. Thank you.
Councillor Stratford, do you wish to comment? Second.
Only if there's any against, saving time.
All right.
Just a point of clarity for me, in the consecutive summary, the last paragraph there, it refers to back to the first committee meeting in 2020.
Yeah. The wrong date, wrong year.
Just clarity.
Right, we're moving quickly. David.
Yeah, I'm very happy to support the recommendation, which is we adopt in principle. My only concern about the strategy as it stands is an enormous amount in it. A lot of it does involve significant capital spend. It's more than a wish list, it's an aspirational list. But to me, there's very little in the way of prioritisation that would enable us to intelligently sort of invest in implementing some part of it. There's a whole list of objectives, pages of them. Alongside each objective are some priorities within it, and then sort of short, medium, long term. And I think it needs to be more refined than that. With goodwill towards the people who put a huge amount of work into doing it, I think in order for us to do anything sensible with it and to commit to resourcing some parts, we need to know what's going to get the biggest bang for the buck. And I've read it very carefully, and at the moment I don't see that, to be honest. Some of the goals are achievable quite cheaply and quite quickly. They're basically about organising communities and volunteers. There's not a lot of cost in that. But as soon as you get into the hard capital spend, I think we do need some guidance about where do we get the best bang for the buck, And in that sense, how do we prioritise any investment we make in the future in the strategy?
Sean,
As I say, with goodwill to the people who've done it.
David, who would you expect to give us that advice? Is Sean on the staff, or is it someone?
Well, I would have thought the drafters of the strategy should give that guidance.
Kelly?
So this regional strategy is more a guidance and framework for play, active recreation and sport across the region. The funding from all the councils, regional and districts, also has helped the formation of spaces and places plans, which is more the hard infrastructure, and we don't see that until I think it's in September. So those spaces and places or facilities plans is where we will need to see a lot more, okay, this is what we need to do in this part of our district, blah, 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 but staff are looking at that first. The strategic direction that the regional strategy provides us with is for the sporting sector. It is more giving high-level priorities for the 40 sports codes that are involved, which actually help with their planning. So it's a document that won't sit on the shelf for places like football or rugby. It's a document that they'll draw on when they're applying for their funding sources for projects that they want to do. But it can also be a supporting document for us because it's got things like the Limbart Park in it. It's got things like the Waipapa Sports Field in it. So it is more a strategic document to support what this council individually wants to achieve. And it was done by, who are they? RSL, with a consultants company that put it together on our behalf. Yeah. Did that help?
Did David help?
Oh,
No.
not really. No, I stand by my point. I don't think we'll need some guidance. We will be one of the people who are, the council is one of the agencies who will be approached for funding. And in order for these people to make their various business cases, you'll need to know what comes first. Is it just first and best dressed, or do we want to think more strategically across our district, let alone the region, as to where the money would go initially? I mean, it's early days. As I say, I have no hesitation in approving in principle the work that's been done. But I do think there's a need for more guidance.
Okay, Kelly, perhaps you can pick that up and chat with you. Sure,
It's just a perspective from my seat, because there's some really good work being done by elected members around sports, but I think I've said to you on the Local Government Act, sport's not really mentioned. It's twice on a word search, and neither really is about obligations of councils or the government bodies to deliver sport. But full wellbeings are coming. Sport's a massive way of building that. And in this strategy, it's great that elected members considering approval in principle with some good follow-on work to come, because whilst the ideas are all good, there is this sort of demarcation conversation that needs to be had between sport and Northern. I'm meeting with Brent Eastwood tomorrow. And you, Brent, look, council's involved in sport because we're the only legitimate body that can go out and get funds off the ratepayer to provide great facilities for their own use. Sport Northland can't do that, and so we need to work with Sport Northland on their strategy, because they are sports experts, supported from the Crown for the work they do. And we just need to keep working with them until we've got a nice overlap between their part in this and our bricks and mortar part in this, and not be sucked into producing sports strategies and running sports operations when, unless you want to buy the staff to do that, we don't actually have at this point. And I'm optimistic about the future, especially with Councillor Kelly doing the sort of work she's doing, but I would like you to share that perspective if you're hard inclined.
Oh, good, thank you, Sean. John, do you have any comment?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Councillor Stratford. You did give a good summary. And I support this, as I said, the resolution there. I think what it's doing is it's giving you principles that they will be looking at, and it's doing that quite well in some respects. Sure, it's not saying this is, you should be focusing on this sports bit or this sports bit, because they are Sports North, and that actually is coming back to us. As Sean mentioned, we're the ones that can raise funding, but when we start doing that, looking at priority, looking for support, both from other players, we should be looking at the principles that actually they're focusing on. And look, and like on page, for example, on page 44, where they list their strategic pillars. So how are we meeting those strategic pillars? In other places they mention other things. How they're mentioning equity and the high deprivation areas and school exiles and stuff. So whenever we're doing anything, we should be bringing all that into our arguments when we set our priorities, and then saying this is how we see it and this is why. So I think they did a good job, and I know that Councillor Stratford's on the Sports North team. Is it ideal? Maybe not, but then I think they've done really well. They note population growth. The only comment I'll make on that one is population growth is not the only factor, and population growth you've got to take into account the average age of the people there. So you're looking at not only the social and other aspects which they do list, but the average age of the community, as a lot of sports are in that young age where it has the biggest effect and sets them up for life. So I think they've covered all of those principles.
We will have further discussions, I don't doubt. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is,
Manny.
oh, Manny, I beg your pardon, Manny, I beg your pardon.
As most of you know, I've been involved in sport all my life. And sport in Northland worries me a great deal. I'll give you a good example. Kaito College. In 1980s, 87, we were a top rugby team in New Zealand. It was through hard work, huge backing from the school and throughout Northland. Now they're nothing. I think there's 70 odd teachers there, not one coaches a Saturday sport. And this is where our problem is. And I see it in J&B, I've seen it in various sports, particularly in my area. There is no one dedicated to taking sport with kids, etc., etc. And whenever sport comes up like this, I tend to worry because we throw money into it, etc., and it just falls apart. Because we haven't got the people, enthusiastic people of many years ago, who would do the hard yards, and it's not happening. And I recall making a speech like this in Sport North, and was in Sport North. We that canoeing, on Lake Natu. There was a hiss and a roar, and then all the canoes were thrown into the rapu, and that's how they were for years. But the good thing, it's come back. But I don't want to see this council being involved in sport to start spending money, and then it just pitters away. That worries me. Otherwise, yep, it's a good concept, but we need to get the backing from the community, and particularly people who want to give up their time to do something for sport.
Thank you, Manny, for those comments. I'm sure Kelly's taken those on board. There's no other comment. I will put the resolution. Oh, beg your pardon.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for providing this paper. I just wanted to note that and support what Manny's raised about sport and how our community has changed in terms of originally when we undertook sport and we had local sports fields, and when people would walk and have localised social amenities like halls and sports fields. Some examples would be Awanui Domain, Wapakakoti Domain, about 5 minutes down the road. In Kaitaia, we had the new sports hub, and 5 minutes down the road we have Arnold Park with its adjacent fields. I think that I just wanted to note that with looking at our open spaces strategy, we really need to recognise exactly how much land Whanau District Council owns or is administered by other bodies for release through council. And if those parcels of land and that infrastructure is being utilised effectively and efficiently in terms of having a sustainable model for future generations, or if indeed those areas are being underutilised and could be utilised better and diversified by the uses that the community could benefit from. I know that we'll be doing this piece of work within our organisation, but I think that instead of looking in silos, we need to look holistically as an organisation about all the assets that we own, including our sports facilities. So I just wanted to note that now, because I know that this will be coming to our council when we're looking at our open spaces strategy.
Thank you, Lucy. It's a very good point. In fact, some of you will recall that a number of us looked at our community halls, for example. I know Adele Garden and I embarked on a journey that didn't last that long because there are some challenges when you start dealing with community. That's my facility, don't you dare touch it, is what we got in Hirakino, I seem to remember.
Woodwork as well.
Yes, and so on. However, but it is an issue, no question about that. The facilities, and Maddie's quite right, the facilities that were there were done in a different era, and we need to look and see how we can get community involvement, etc. I'm sure Kelly and the team, you'll be looking at that, all that aspect of this stuff, so thank you very much. Okay, any other comments? If not, I'll put the resolution. Have you got the emergency? Yes. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you very much. We will now come to item 6.2 on page 66. I just draw to your attention that you'll see that there's a change to the wording. So we just need to make it that it's the Far North District Council who grants consent, etc., rather than there's a follow-on from a community board. So do I have a mover for this motion, please? Thank you, Maddie, and seconded David. Comments?
Sorry, Your Worship, can I have a point of order?
Sure.
In regard to Green Farm Holdings Limited is responsible. This is our road, so I'm not quite sure how we can transfer that responsibility to Farm Holding. So when you asked about changing the word to Farm District Council, are you talking about B as well?
Okay, can we have advice, please? Is somebody able to comment on that? Kay's not here, obviously. Andy?
As far as I'm aware, then Holdings is operating slightly within
What is the question? Sorry, Your Worship.
Sorry, can I restate my question? This is a road, a public road with public egress. A matter of parking enforcement is the Farmers District Council. I don't believe we have the authority to delegate that to Farmers Holdings. I absolutely understand the intent of what the community board is trying to achieve, but I'm just wondering if the best way to address this is that, given we're going out for a parking control bylaw, is that we incorporate this within our parking control bylaw, and that then gives us legal teeth to enforce our parking.
Just on page 66.
Might just get, this would be a bit of a short notice question, George, but if the chair permits.
Yeah, George may be able to give us an answer, and then I'll come to Dave.
So a question of agency, George. I mean, we're the enforcing group, but it's about where the Whanau Holdings Limited is.
What I understand is correct, because it is a public road, where there are, although we're releasing the subsoil to them where their tanks are, it would be for us to enforce the parking, the no parking facility on that. So I think that Anne is quite correct.
Yeah, just speculative, and Frank might sort of reinforce this. The community board, with a demonstrating the value of local knowledge, observed that often vehicles are parked on that health point, which is obviously a problem with the taco rides. The hope was that some infrastructure might be put there, not just some yellow paint and a big no parking sign, but a bollard or a bench or some such that would be functional and non-intrusive, but would achieve the goal of preventing vehicles from parking there. So that was the hope, as I recall, the intent of the community.
It was the hope.
So do we really have to go to the extent of moving it into a bylaw in order to achieve a fairly humble outcome, which is simply to put a barrier to parking there? And it could, as I say, be in the form of an asset, like a little lighting bollard or a small bench or something.
I'd like to see used. No, the concern of the community board was just to make sure there was not parking there. The wording, Carnival Holdings too, that wasn't really the concern. The concern was really that in that area there be no parking. I understand that the area was painted and there are signs.
Richard, could I suggest a simple solution?
Yes, please.
That we
please do.
That we remove the from the resolution, but that we ask for a report back from the roading team about a practical measure that they could implement along the lines that Councillor Clinton spoke about, that would physically prevent cars from parking on them.
Frank, that seems to be sensible to me.
Yeah, the only thing I'm wondering is that space needed for them bringing in fuel?
Again, the report can cover that,
yeah. Yeah, but that I thought might be part of the reason why there's a concern about parking.
Okay, so if we just
Just going to ask that we remove B from this resolution and we have a secretariat note. I don't think it needs a formal resolution, but we would request a report back to, and it needs to go to the community board in the first instance to look at practical options to achieve their objective.
So if we pass.
Also, if we can just see if there's any issue with it, the way it was actually worded, to be honest. You know, you've got fuel tanks under the ground, there's a health and safety issue, you've got trucks coming in delivering the fuel. And I don't know if trailing boats come along as well. So all of these things are unknown. And I'm a bit reluctant to take a recommendation that's done by people who know what the situation is and then start messing with it. I'm happy to have B removed, but I'm a little bit nervous about what the consequences will be.
Frank?
I don't think there would be significant concern to the community with removing B, providing something was put in place to ensure that whatever the concerns were with parking were addressed.
That doesn't address John's question, which I doubt whether we've got enough information to tell us that it's safe. It's not going to blow up when someone puts their car cover on, which is what
Your Worship, can I add, Farnell Holdings will have, this is a hazardous substance, so Farnell Holdings will have to have significant certification to have this and health and safety plans in place. So I don't think that's something that we need to turn our minds to. We just need governance comfort that it exists.
So perhaps we can, if we pass A and then ask for a report, and it can just make reference to the health and safety issues as well as parking. That's the other thing to see.
Or you can delegate it to the community board, but I would try.
Either way, we'll go back.
It was quite clear the report needs to go back to the community board. I did state that.
All right, so if we just note that when we vote, we'll just vote on A, and that we will then expect a report to be developed on the parking issue plus the health and safety issues to go back to the community board. We'll just note that in the minutes.
Thank you.
You're right with that, Ken? All right, so we'll just vote on resolution A. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. That's carried. Thank you very much. Mindful that we'll just see everybody. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So we now come to page 6.3. Resolution on 9, if you're looking for a second. So that's been moved by Councillor Usage and seconded by Councillor Pollard. Right. John, you want to make a comment?
My comment, this is a long-standing issue and there's been about 10 metres of erosion since it was first put out there. It's very similar to what we're doing in High here. We're protecting assets, protecting sewage pipes, we're also protecting our water pipes and protecting the the car park and various other things. The longer we leave it, the more expensive it's going to be, so let's move on this.
John, we had a significant discussion about it relatively recently.
So that's my time.
Dave, you want to comment?
Oh, nothing further than that, except for an element of speed.
Okay, thank you. Rachel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am in support of the recommendation in this paper. I did have a couple of things that I wanted to point out, though. The first one being that currently this sits outside of our reserves policy, and it's noted in here that the current reserve policy contains no policy direction or objectives that consider climate change, sea level rise, or coastal erosion, and so the policy direction it contains does not offer any substantive guidance in respect of the situation that is the subject of this report. So what I would like to ensure is that we capture that feedback there in our learnings and implement it into the reserve policy script that we are in the process of reviewing at the moment. So I just wanted to really raise that to ensure that while this recommendation is within the purpose of Esplanade's reserve set out in the RMA, it is outside of policy, and it's important that going forward with climate change and addressing erosion risks that our policy is fit for purpose. So I just wanted to raise that. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll just pause for a second. Can we just note in the minutes that Rachel's made that comment, that we need to include it in our
Review of reserves policy.
Reserves policy. Just to see how we can copy that. Thank you very much. And we can have it on as part of our council action sheet going forward. That will be very useful. All right, if there's no other comment, I will put the resolution. It's been moved and seconded. All in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Oh, sorry. Oh, you abstain. Okay. And I've got to say, it'll be good when we can go out and enjoy the comfort of the toilets out there without worrying about looking into the sea. Right, we will move on to page 219, and our elected members conference report. Have you read it? Thank you. Second. Do you wish to make a comment?
Just very briefly, Your Worship, it was a really great report, and it's fantastic to see the collaboration at a board level getting really smart, so we don't get 1, 2, 3, 8 reports back, we get one, so thank you for that. I thought that there were some really great learnings captured within here, and what I would love to perhaps hear from staff about would be how we can turn some of the learnings and the recommendations into action, be that through combined community board workshops, or how we consider this. For example, there was some really great commentary around digital opportunities, and that actually aligns with a lot of our nothing but net strategy and the work that's going on there. So I guess my question is, how can we connect work streams that are happening, learnings that you guys are taking from these opportunities, mush them together for some great community outcomes? So if there was any advice around that, perhaps through our CEO, that would be great. Thank you.
That's what we do. That's what we do all day, every day in operations, is we learn from our mistakes, and we have some quite a few, and we're actively learning, and these reports are very, very helpful indeed.
So I guess it just cements the importance of our community boards and the learnings that we can continue to take from them. So thank you.
And thank you. Is there any more?
Just wanted to thank our community board members who put this together, because it's quite comprehensive. I might have to throw one up then, because I might put one in, because mine's usually only about 2 pages long.
Oh, no.
No, I'm just joking. I heard anecdotally from community board members from our own district, but also from other districts, that this was a really awesome conference. And I really appreciate the fact that it was in rural New Zealand, or our local government New Zealand conference is going to be in Blenheim, and our young elected members conference, who knows yet, but let's hope that it's going, that it's coming this way.
Sounds positive.
On the final page of this report, can I just point out the oxymoron that is lovely gore? Thank you.
Lovely what? Lovely gore.
Lovely.
Can I just quote one little sentence that really stuck out for me from what they got out of it? They quote somebody named Ken Ross. Oh, you will find your purpose in life in selfless service to others. And selflessness is one of my keywords this year.
Well done, thank you. Adele wanted to make
Yes, I would just sort of like to thank you, thank Jackie Brown, Member Brown, for compiling this report, of which all the members that were funded actually fed into this particular report, so we all had a say in what went into it. And also I'd like to thank Member Frank Owens, who did a substantial research before the conference. So there's a lot of copied and pasting on into this report as well from his research. So thank you. I think it was brilliant, but it was a great conference.
Thank you, Adele. And if you wish to make any further comments, send your name in, because Mike Edmonds also wishes to make comments.
Yeah, no, not really. I just acknowledge also Jackie's role, Jackie Brown, because there was a lot of input from everybody who went. And we all saw everybody's input, and I remember sitting there and thinking, my God, I'm glad I don't have to sort through all that to get a consensus. But she did, and she made an awesome job.
Great, thank you for that. Thank you. I'm sure you'll pass that Frank's comments on to Jackie. Mike, welcome, Mike. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, John. Hey, look, just a correction. I'm echoing. Okay, I didn't attend on behalf of the Far North District Council. I went as part of the Community Board Executive Committee of GNZ. I know that the CEO is very sensitive to the public thinking that too many people go on conferences and are paid for by the Far North District Council. So we can remove my name from that, so the one next person is actually paid for. But it was very good.
Thank you, Mike, for that comment. Thank you, Mike. Kim's correcting that for us. Are there any other comments anyone wishes to make? If not, we will. Of course it is. Right, so it's been moved and seconded. All in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Just while we're on community board issues, I'm just going to ask Adele and Mike and Frank if they wish to make any comments from community board perspective about recent activities. Anything specific you need to bring up that's not on the agenda?
Not that I can think of. No.
Thank you.
No, not at this point. We do have our community board meeting on Tuesday, so there could well be some issue.
For the following meeting.
There this next Tuesday.
Mike Edmonds, anything you wish to bring from the Western or Kaikohe board to the council's attention?
Not at this juncture.
Okay, thank you very much, my friend. All right, so that's supplement. No, it's not. Right, so now we move to the supplementary agenda remits. 6.6 to start on page 17.
Sorry, can you tell me if I come on?
Oh, I beg your pardon, did I put all? Well, I'm in favour, we don't need everyone else to be. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you very much. Right, so can we come to remits? And want to have a discussion on remits so that those of us who are attending the conference know how we should be voting. So I will move the resolution. Do I have a seconder, please?
Sure.
Thank you. And now it's open for discussion. We'll take them one at a time so we can have a discussion on the rating value of forestry. And
Rating value of forestry. Any comment?
Yes, I'm actually, as I spoke against it, I'm going to speak against it again. And the reason, well, I know that forestry does break roads, but so does just about every other activity that involves trucks. And often when you do your rates as the landowner and in forestry, many landowners actually do not own the forest. And so you're taking the wrong people, and that's why the land is actually often of a low value. It's very difficult land, and the land value comes down to the financial returns to the owner. So that's what that's reflecting. And secondly, I don't actually like double taxing, and essentially if you look at the product going off the logs, it's picked up by logging companies generally. At that stage, they take off, they cause damage to the roads, sure, but there's a road user charge that you to pick that up. Also, to say that the number for the traffic on the road is in excess of the road design, that should be picked up by the One Network roading classification and appropriate funding made available. And so essentially you're paying your tax through your road user charge, and now we're trying to increase it as well from the landowner. Now, just to put in perspective, if you're developing a property in a urban area, the amount of truck traffic, kilometres essentially, is equivalent to 10 rotations of a forest. And that's done by some calculation based on the tonnage going off forest there and the tonnage being done in the road development by trucks and all the machinery and everything else. So it's not, it's not as simple as that. So actually, I think there is already a differential which is taking into a significant impact on the forestry. Given also we like trees, as we're planting many of them, I would rather that they remain as is, so I don't necessarily support that. So I'm not going to support that. That's my comments.
Sorry.
Okay, is there any other comments? Thank you, John, for those comments. You don't think we should support the remit?
No, the reason is that it should be covered by the current reviews change in the first.
Any other comments?
Your Worship, I'm actually going to support the remit. I think there needs to be a comprehensive analysis and review done, and it may be that the comprehensive analysis and review actually finds that we don't support the remit ultimately, but we just simply don't have the work yet to understand what that looks like, particularly in light of the current funding constraints and the dynamically moving environment of New Zealand. So I will be supporting the remit.
You will be supporting the remit, all right? Okay. Other comments? That's for those of us who are voting. One against one.
Sorry,
Rachel.
Councillor Vucic raises a really good point around the ownership of our forestry lands. I don't know what that is statistically in terms of how many of our forestry blocks are owned and operated by the same entity, and I was wondering if we had any staff guidance around that, especially when it comes to Māori-owned forestry blocks.
We can certainly find out for you. I doubt we've got that data in the room, staff. No, can find out for you.
Thank you.
Probably not the time for the resolution.
We have some very high-level data in our LTP, which quantifies the number of rating assessments attributable to forestry.
With all due respect, that doesn't answer my question about the ownership versus the leasing and operating of the forestry blocks, which is where my concern sits.
Yeah, I'll say more nationally, there's an enormous amount of land which is owned by one agency or entity. The cutting rights to the timber is owned by somebody else. Ultimately, if the rating did increase on that land, then the cost would be borne presumably by those leasing the land and taking the increase. It's been a big problem, well, a controversy down central North Island, particularly concerned that land is effectively alienated over quite long periods of leases to mostly offshore interests that get the cutting rights and thereby the value from it. So, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I'd hold them as a guess for all.
Your Worship, can I just raise a further point? There's no difference to this whether it's a dairy farm or an avocado farm or a dairy farm. The reality is that someone else will inevitably be carting the goods. So the correlation that Councillor Vucic has raised, while it's interesting, it doesn't address the impact of what the remit's trying to address, which is the damage to our roads. And I just think we need to do the work.
But she'd answer that. the roads, the truck section, if you say you're not paying your fair share to the truckies, they'll be upset because most of the road usage comes from the truck. Carrying all the produce from the dairy farms, and from the goods going down and from the forest. So that's covered. And if there's much traffic on the road and you've got your one road classification, which we need to maybe address and then say, well, that is not correct. And I'd argue that that is not correct.
Well, that's been helpful so far. For those of us who have to go to conference and vote, we've got one each side.
Anyway,
I think the point, Your Worship, is that we don't have enough information to make a decision, so the purpose of why I suggested we could talk agreement is let's get the information we need to make a proper informed decision.
Nettie wanted to comment?
Summit Forests, that's a big forest company up in the far north of Waipapakari and the Bob Shirley. Now they lease a lot of land where the pine trees are, especially out of Parapara, those back roads. They maintain all the roads. They maintain those roads. They don't give the council anything, the damage they do, they fix it up, etc., etc. And I think most companies do that.
Yeah, I'll just comment. Obviously, this is an issue with some controversy. I'm quite happy to support the motion going forward, in part because it'll create a forum where all of these issues can be discussed between local bodies collectively and government who makes the rules. So in that sense, it would make sense to me to put it on the table. Remember, these are only supporting agreements going to the floor of the AGM. That's, to me, would be the place for a well-informed conversation which might trigger change or not. So I heard there's a number of these I'm not terribly thrilled about, but as I say, I seldom see lack of value in putting something on the floor for a discussion.
In fact, Rachel raised with me, which I'm now trying to find out, once a remit is passed at the local government conference, what the hell happens to it then? And, I'm actually trying to find that out because it's something that never occurred to me. We vote on things, but whether LGNZ picks it up, I don't know. But so the point that's being made is allowing discussion seems to be a sensible thing. What were you wanting to comment?
I think that as local government New Zealand, maybe National Council should push for an action sheet update list for our outstanding agreements year in, year out.
Yes.
I just picked up that this is being proposed by Gisborne City Council. Gisborne is not a city council, it's a district council, and you have to have a population of 50,000 urban dwellers to be a city council these days. So they've got a typo there that I just wanted to contribute to.
I think the teacher's red pen.
It's a unitary authority.
Unitary authority.
But it's a designated district council.
Okay. All right, I think we've had enough discussion. Are we happy just to let this, subject to John's point of view, let this go forward for further discussion?
Well, we can vote on that. Sorry? You can vote on that.
Oh, one by one.
All right. So, all right, well, I'll all right, all in favour of us supporting the remit going to the floor of conference?
Oh, okay. I mean, each item one by one.
Yeah,
we do.
We're doing number one.
Oh, I'm not there yet. Oh, just look up there.
Okay, so all in favour?
Aye.
Against?
No, recorded.
Okay, Kellyanne's on against, so we'll, those of us who attend the conference will allow for that to go forward and vote for it to go forward from there. Funding of civics education.
Aye.
Well, hang on, we've got to.
Oh. You want to talk about every single one?
You are entitled to, that others might want to make comments. Does anybody want to make comments? Don't feel you have to.
Very briefly, I think this is an absolute no-brainer. We should be teaching civics in schools. I recall I was teaching politics at Auckland Uni in the late 90s, and I failed to go into stage 1 classes, and it generally broke down. I'd ask a question about who's the head of state, who's the head of government, and what's the difference between the two. And about a third of the students at first year level would have a good understanding. About a third knew it was vaguely something to do with the Governor General, and the other third didn't understand the question. And these were relatively bright kids in uni to study politics, and they didn't know that one basic fact, about how our constitution, how our democratic system works, and I think things haven't got better in the intervening years. So it's absolutely overdue.
Rachel Moffel, Rachel, Mr. John.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Councillor Clinton has pointed out, I'm also an absolute support of this remit, not only for the civics education side of things, but because that will be delivered, funded and delivered at a local level, which in particular excites me. This has been identified as a strategic priority for the Young Elected Member Network and the committee. So to see this remit here, I just want to thank Hamilton City Council for bringing it up.
Thank you for that. Just remind everyone that all we're asking is those of us who attend the conference will support it going forward.
Yeah.
Two hands on this.
This is currently being, only just June last year, the Ministry of Education released their first civics education plan, and it's not localised at all. It's not going to work at all. It needs to be local, and that'll be important because I think half of the population of Kaikohe think I'm the mayor, so we might need to fix that up.
Yes, getting more information, I don't think it goes far enough. I'd like to, picking up Mr. Councillor Tavanea said, it needs to be local, but more importantly, I noticed in Australia they actually provide a course. So I think there's a course where you can be qualified as an EP and be qualified as an EP. Well, why don't we do something similar and provide, a training and a qualification that says you can't become the mayor or something.
Train someone to be an EP.
Thank you.
Anyway, okay, so we're happy for this to be discussed at conference, obviously. Is that okay? All in favour of that?
Aye.
Carbon emission inventory standard and reduction targets.
You don't
Voting for,
You don't want to.
No.
Carbon emission, sorry. Yeah, what about, yeah, the carbon emission.
One missing, the election participation.
I thought I had actually, I came across it and then I thought I must have taken up reading the paper. Promoting local government election participation on page 87. Okay. I think it's something we should be encouraging. Yes, we vote for it. Okay, we'll take that for granted as we'll go forward. Carbon emission inventory standard. So developing consistently, supporting us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also, Mr. Chair, very quickly that yes, we do support that, but I presume that the respective councils are going to be charged the carbon tax as well as part of this.
That will be part of the discussion, I'm sure.
They ought to be.
Okay, so we're happy for us to support that. Winds accommodation supplement. Yes, we're supporting that.
Well, just being a little bit ambivalent about that, it's us kind of reaching into what I think really should be central government territory. Income redistribution is not our task particularly. I've got no problem with it going for a conversation, but I just, as I say, I don't think it's a particularly well thought through remit, to be honest.
Leave it to the wisdom of those attending conference.
That's it.
Okay, the next one's liability, building consent functions. Well, of course, this is all change, likely to change as we go forward. So it'll be part of the ongoing discussion for the city.
Thank you, John. I just want to frame about the liability function in terms of those representing our council. I just find it strange that of all of the changes that the government could make, we already have one building act across all of New Zealand where they could take that off councils and there would be no regulatory change, and that would take the liabilities off the ratepayer as well for leaky buildings, and yet that has not been one of the items in terms of local government change. So I think that needs to be raised at the local government level. That is part of the local government reforms. Central government should back that with their insurance.
I think, firstly, that Minister Parker's letter absorbed it all. I think it might actually, I think, but anyway, we'll consider that with this letter because that's part of the reforms.
Thanks. May I make one quick comment?
Yeah.
I'm disappointed on the agreements when you're given what we're going through and various statements that there were agreements that were covering other aspects, such as localism that was raised and the 3/4 and various other.
We haven't put it in, that's our responsibility.
Yeah, I was just reiterating, these are not LGNZ agreements, these are council agreements.
The council agreements, which we could have put in. Okay, all right. And
I
then,
just
sorry.
want to say that I didn't know about the consentium that had been set up, you know, in the division of kind order. So if this remit hadn't come to councils for consideration, I would not have been any the wiser. So I admire these councils, you know, putting it up, because we've seen the impacts of leaky buildings, you know, from when, you know, legislation changed, what, I think it was 20 years ago, and then we're still footing the bill for that crap. So good on these councils. I support this remit because it could be a risk for us in the future.
Thank you. And the final one is tree protection.
Oh, yeah, well, can I point out the oxymoron that Auckland Council actually killed a tree with 2 cent agreement in the first place?
Yes, exactly.
And I do note that the staff recommend that we don't support it, but on a personal level, I think we should. On a personal level, I cry every time the community board authorises another tree to be chopped down in our urban town centres. Every time someone writes in and says, I want a tree removed, they quote the Health and Safety Act, we all clap our pants and chop the tree down because we're scared about the liability that, hey, something might fall down and land on somebody. And so I think we do need to start protecting trees that are significant.
Yes, I wouldn't disagree with that. Just as well you were with me the other day when I went and saw a gentleman who's got some trees that were put in by Lands and Survey many years ago, gums. You know, I know not the trees you're talking of significance, but now going to the stage where they are in danger, they're falling over. And he's asked if I can help get them removed. So, anyway, David.
Yeah, I also support, I think we should support this, unsurprisingly perhaps. I was in Auckland when that tree protection was lifted. I was actually involved with the tree council, and the result was devastating in a lot of areas. They lost their character. Quite large standing trees were wiped out in very short order. All this agreement seeks to do is to use the current RMA reform to restore the right of councils to adopt and enforce locally appropriate policies to protect trees. Why would we possibly abstain from that?
All right, if we're all in agreement to support it, at the councils, we will. I thought you were going to say Auckland lost its significance when Tim moved into code. Okay, thank you all. That's sufficient guidance for those of us attending the conference. Can we come now to the council action sheet on page 2? Oh, I've got to put the resolution. You want? Do we? All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
No, carried. Thank you very much. Council action sheet on page 231.
Yeah, my iPad.
I'll move. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Morkel. Right, the floor is open for comments. Anybody want to make comments? Anne?
Worship, I think this is a great first start. I want to thank everybody for really buying into it. I'm just wondering if we can make it a little tidier. I found reading the motion and the amendment and the resolution in full lost clarity on what we were trying to do here. If I just one example, council for financial contributions payable to the Kawakawa Business Association, tick done, drops off the agenda. I don't think we need all the motion and the amendment in there. And then if there's another one in there that's going to sit on there, options for controlling and regulating trade in public places, we've got now being considered as a new roadway, stays on there until it's crossed off.
Until it's ticked up.
Yeah, just tidy it up. I didn't understand all the comments adjusted by the staff. I didn't know what that actually meant. in the side column that said this was adjusted by ASHA or adjusted by somebody else, and that appears fairly regularly throughout the report, and I just thought it's quite clear. And I really love the idea of a traffic light system, so we can start to see green, that's good, we're making great progress. Yellow, there might be some commentary around there around what the challenges might be, and red, well, the elected member can then say, why is that red, Mr. Chief Executive, what's the challenges, and another look at it. So I think this is a great first cut, and I'm not saying this to be critical, I'm just thinking that there's a little bit of work that we could do here to tidy it up a bit more. Thank you.
And actually save staff time. If it's done, we don't need to report it to save it. So that's a good point from all.
But thank you, Mayor Carter. Going off what Deputy Mayor Court was saying about a bit hard to read, maybe it is. I noticed that Kelly's amendment to the amendment at our extraordinary council meeting to where we adopted Māori wards for the iwi and hapu reps on our committees was missing, I think. But then it made me think, well, what else could be missing, or did I miss it?
So at the representation meeting, Caroline brought up that issue which was discussed. So
I would have expected to see it here, I guess, with that as another action that's taken place in that space. I guess up until we have enough reps on our committees.
Yeah, no,
we'll see it there.
We'll make a note of that. Thank you. Felicity and then John.
Thank you, Richard. I have brought this up, I'm not sure how many times now, 5. The footpath from Te Atu to the Te Atu Sports Hub. It's been planned for a number of plans and also a special resolution, and my latest update from the MTA was that they were scoping and delivering it. I'm just wondering where on the action sheet that is, and I'm not sure why that keeps slipping year after year.
How can we make a note of that and put on the action sheet?
Yes. Through the chair, there's just a list of resolutions and follow up on resolutions. You're saying it's a missing resolution?
Yes, so there was a special resolution, council plan voted against it, the rest of the council supported it for additional funding to provide for the footpath, and it still was not delivered last construction season. I followed up again, it said it's been carried forward to this year. It's still not scoped that I'm aware of in an individual.
Yes, it's a resolution that should be on the action sheet.
Thank you.
Mikata, should we, like, I'm just thinking of other things I'm thinking down here. Who should we send those to, maybe, as an easier way of me bringing it up?
Chief Executive. Okay. If there's things that you think are missing off the action sheet, please send an email. You can copy me in, but send them to Sean. And then, assuming they're appropriate, like the issue that's Felicity just raised, they can go on the action sheet. There's a finger up there.
Sorry, I have a question. I was wanting to go on the question order form.
Sorry.
Was John Visage next?
Yeah, very quickly, just on page 233, and that was amendment and seconded by Felicity, and that corrects the 2017 resolution of council discharge investigation and address draft resilience. That resolution, if you have a look at it, is broader than just a dandy typo or something of that nature. I got people still asking in about tanks and various other things included. That should be pulled out and mentioned in here more.
Can you do some wording, please, to get to Sean? So thank you. Right.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a question on page 238 where it talks about the all of the supply of electricity contracts, and I note that those contracts were to commence on the 1st of July 2021, which is today. And in the notes column, it notes that the target date has been shifted to the 2nd of August 2021. So I just wanted to get some clarity as to what the risk is if those contracts haven't yet been entered into and why the target date had been moved.
Staff comments?
Any helpful?
Sorry, Your Worship, just noting that we had to hold an extraordinary committee meeting today because we weren't going to meet in DMP in the resolution, and this is another case right here.
Chair, I think, so the target revision date and the target date, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it just says resolution date state by 1st of July 2021, but then it also states that the target date had been moved to the 2nd of August.
That's
I'm just
the
wanting
target date for
confirmation.
the action to be completed
So I'm just
by
wanting-
staff, so not so for it to remain an outstanding action, we need to change the target date in Info Council, so that's just so that it can stay on the outstanding action sheet.
So if I rephrase my question, have those contracts been entered into, being that the date is the 1st of July 2021? I'm just looking for governance comfort around that. If perhaps I could get that information back to me.
Just name,
That would be great.
name the resolution, please. Councillor.
Resolution 2021//13.
Thank you. We'll take that on advice if we can. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Just on that point, it was good getting that explanation, because the way readiness, it appears that the staff have sort of gone around willy-nilly and changed all the dates of the, which I'm sure they haven't, yeah. So I wonder if that is a bit superfluous. Do we actually need to see that, or is it something just internal to, as I say, we don't want to give the impression that staff are busily putting projects back 12 months because they felt like it that day, or sure they don't. Yeah, in terms of Councillor Ford's comments, this is good, and the simpler, the more easily read it is, the better. But it's great to have.
Yep, no, thank you, and then given it's our first go, it'll evolve. Anne, did you want to add?
I just wanted clarity. Councillor Foy raised the question of a footpath, and I just wondered how in-depth we want this action report to be. It's not my expectation that it will capture every capital work project. For example, that would look quite well to fit in the capital works report that comes forward. So I just think perhaps some clarity or some guidelines around what actually goes in here and what goes somewhere else might be helpful.
We're operating on clear guidelines that this is resolutions in council, full stop, and I'm assured by Councillor Foy, and she has a bit of recent read on this than I do, that there was one that's been missed off. So we'll go and check that that's the case, but we're not expecting it to be any broader than that. And I too like the way this is unfolding. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you all for that. Council action sheet, so we'll just seeing it all in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, no carried. Thank you very much. Roading Control Authority Form 242. Councillor Ford, I'll second. Councillor Ford.
I just want to demonstrate to my colleague that I've already got my reading and gone through and found all my typos when I reread it, so I do apologise in advance for all my typos. Your Worship, I don't think there's anything new in here that I haven't already expressed quite passionately in the chamber a number of times, so I'm happy to take my report.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. And Ed, can I just say, acknowledge and thank you for the work that you've done and are doing in that regard, and the good publicity you got around the lack of funding, and quite honestly, all of us, and we will be doing this from a Northland perspective as well, but it actually is an issue we need to the local government, and it's a serious issue for us.
Worship, can I just ask the Chief Executive, I've raised the issue of a video, and I'd really like that not to drop off. I would really like us to seriously consider doing that video to a light-hearted look at the practicalities of the government's agenda on rural New Zealand.
Are you?
I've talked to a number of you about the idea behind that video. I've talked to my comms portfolio holder over here, Councillor Smith. I think there's merit in doing it. I don't want it just to be a conversation that gets dropped.
Do you want to tell the council about the part of the stock truck that drives by, or?
No,
No,
we're live streaming, your worship.
Okay, Sean, can we please just note in the minutes that it's an issue that Chief Executive is to discuss with the deputy?
Yeah.
Thank you. You can do that, please. Okay, thank you for that, Anne, and we'll, you and I, I'm sure, will continue talking about that because I think it is important. Actually, I think there's a real opportunity. I think you're absolutely right. And particularly the splashing part, I like that. I think it's going to. Okay, so 7.3 on page 246. I will move. Do I have a second, please? Thank you, Councillor Ford. Right. Mr. CEO, Sean, we're in your hands. Take us through.
Just an overview, really, we're in an extraordinary period of transformation. I'm grateful to those amongst us who are just giving a little bit of elbow space to everyone who's under the hammer. It's extreme. There's barely anything bolted to the floor at the moment. It's not like anything's out of control. It's not like anything's been dropped. It's not like we've failed at anything. But we are just surrounded by environmental drivers that are new and are completely changing the business we're in. I'm mentioning this here as a headline because it's very relevant day by day at the moment. We just got to keep our pants on and turn up to work, working with each other, if you don't mind me saying, your worship, because gravity is against us. If I just look at some of the macro changes that are going on for local government and for the people we serve, that you serve most directly, we're dealing with roading resources that are at short notice unavailable and trying to rationalise a long-term plan that was well designed by you and now unfundable. And the fallout, the technical execution of that and the fallout publicly. We've got local government reform, which is a program to entirely rewrite the local government sector. Third, we've got the three waters reforms, and we got sensational news yesterday about what the entities are looking like and what the boundaries of the water amalgamations are going to look like, and a lot more to come. Fourth, we've got resource management reform. The Resource Management Act reform, which is a major piece of work, and we'll see a lot of resource management work disappear from local government and go to the territorial authorities at least, and go to the region for management. We have Māori wards to administrate. That's a great piece of work done by our elected members in our public, but making it real takes quite a bit of work in terms of our representation review. So we're in the middle of all that at the moment. Sixth, we've got Project Darwin, which is a fundamental rewrite of the way we manage our $2.1 billion worth of assets in a much more deliberate and concise way, which is great news, but it takes a huge amount of work. We've got 23 projects from Provincial Growth Fund and Crown Infrastructure Fund programs, which are now hitting at this very moment the spend phase. And most of them are in ship shape, but 4 or 5 really big collaborations with community leaders who are not used to running $10 million projects. It's taken us into some new territory, and there's quite a bit of tension around, if I could speak plainly, about making sure that those projects can be executed with acceptable levels of risk. 8, housing is newly on the agenda, and what is the role of local government in a national push to get as much affordable housing for those who are able to look at buying and social housing for those who aren't onto the ground in our place. In terms of 9, solid waste is something we want to have a look at regionally, so we're committed to the other councils, the other 3 councils, and trying to review a way forward for better solid waste management. 10 economic development, and they're just bought into on the long-term plan, the Northland Inc. one-stop shop for what economic development looks like in the region. Great piece of work, but lots of effort going in around that. 11, climate change. That's on our doorsteps, literally in some cases, and we've got, again, a regional approach to that so that we don't have 4 councils doing their own reinvention of the wheel. 12, we've got the 4 wellbeings to execute. It's in the Local Government Act. There's a lot of emphasis about how we can participate in social, economic, environmental and cultural wellbeing, and we haven't got a plan yet that can be executed. 13 SNAs, which was a very celebratable reminder of what democracy can be, but that's got to be extracted now from the district plan and on some sort of separate timetable working conference with the ministers to try and get us a way forward outside of the district plan timeline. Council Mark gave us a fantastic result for the work we've done over the last couple of years in improving ourselves as a council. We've gone from B to double B, but every line in there is being analysed at the moment about what it means for the future. And so we've got this up and out approach to getting better appreciation on the street for what we've invested in capability and capacity. So that's a whole new area of work. And in support of that, an organisational strategy at my level and below, which is your staff's working out how to make up and out real on the street, how to actually get to much better customer feedback. So if that's 15 really big things when normally we get 3 or 4, it's not the complete list. And I'm aware just recently we've got the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, which is the first $1 billion from final order to be contestably bid for to help with housing developments, and a thing called Kanoa, which is the Regional Strategic Partnership Fund, which you might call a mini PGF, not $1 billion a year, but $200 million a year, which is for councils to bid into, and it actually goes on. So if I can come back to the point, this is a March, April bi-monthly report, but it signals the beginning of a really busy new period where we've got shed loads of stuff on. We can celebrate navigating our course. Well done to all elected members for participating in the 22 events in 18 communities and hearing 80 submissions out of 770 submissions, or 80 physical submissions out of that many written submissions. Thanks for the collaboration on council mark between elected members and staff. But the big issues are going to be dominating our thinking going forward, and that there's a lot of people, elected members and staff, finding that simultaneous management of these quite stressful. To finish, in the big picture, we are a progressive council. We're on the front of this wave. We've already been in a constant state of change for the last 3 years. Nothing is not doable in the list I've given you, but there will be some shortcuts that have to be taken to do this amount of work with the same size staff that we've got. But in general, I'm really pleased with what staff's been able to do during the period, and we look forward to one more of these bi-monthlies for the financial year, which of course ended yesterday. That's all, but I'm take any questions that you've got, and we'll see what we can do to answer it live.
Questions, folks? David?
Sure. You just mentioned housing, social housing, affordable. I don't think we've had, as a council, had a sort of first principles conversation about the level of engagement we have in that.
It's coming up.
That is on the track.
So we've scheduled that for the 22nd of July. I've asked Will Taylor and Janice. No? Cheryl, that's right. Taylor and Cheryl sorry to forget who was the other, Batman and Robin and that. That will be a multi-party, there's about half a dozen authors of various parts of the housing program coming in to sit in chambers with you. I'm calling it a stock taker jigsaw piece. It's really exactly that, Councillor. It's an opportunity for you to get your head around the big picture on what's being attempted here by government, what our supporting role might be.
Right, you're saying the placeholder.
Rachel?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for that verbal update that went alongside this report, Sean. Just a couple of points. The first one was a question around, we sit at this table knowing that the CEO report is like a mashup of all of the other reports that we go to other areas, and what I would be keen to maybe have a conversation with you about is whether there were opportunities in some higher interest areas to just make a note of where there is further reporting available, which leads me into the two questions that I've got. So the first question, animal management on page 277. Elected members around the table may have received, there's a high level of interest around the last statement. The Northern Animal Shelter is on track to be operational and receive dogs from July 2021. Once operational, the temporary dog pound and Horeki will be decommissioned. So that's just triggered a little bit of an alarmist response, I think, and it would be good to get some comfort as to what that transition process looks like and what's being done to ensure that level of service won't change through that period. The second question I had was around swimming pools on page 283. I note that our compliance is still sitting at 30% failure, and I know that we have a conversation at regulatory, but I wanted to bring it up now because I had opportunity. Dame Jenny Shipley chose to stand for central government to get pool fencing in place. It's an important thing, and I would like to see that 30% number decrease. It is kids' lives that we know are sacrificed when those pool fences aren't compliant. So going forward, it would be good to see some information about what we can be doing from an educational point of view to ensure that we increase that compliance. Thank you. Those are my 2 points.
We might just give Dean an opportunity to address the dogs timetable for start. If we can't handle the calls today, we should get back out of session. But what do you think, Dean?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the transition arrangements, once the Northern Shelter is operational, we believe that all of our animals will be held there for a while until the Southern is built and available to us. Horeki has been an issue for us ongoing in that we've leased the space and the adjoining farmers haven't been happy about that. So we've been dealing with that. We want to honour our commitment to the neighbouring farmers. We want to extract ourselves from Horeki as soon as possible. We believe that the Northern Shelter allows us to do that. Yes, it does present some challenges logistically, but from an operational point of view, I can give you assurances that that side of things has been addressed. And we are confident that we can manage in that way in the short term until the Southern is built and available.
And the Paul, are you able to comment on that?
Swimming pools.
30% non-compliant.
With the compliance on swimming pools, the focus is on follow-up. In terms of our ability to, in the cycle of checks on swimming pools, and to address that under the new Building Act requirements for pools, we have a very active program of follow-up. So the percentages will get better, we believe. We're just reporting and reflecting here what we have been able to do to date. But we are confident that our program will address the percentages in a constructive and positive way.
Thank you, Dean. Any other comments anybody have on the Chief's report?
Just one comment. In terms of noise control, there's 225 complaints there. Are they from licensed premises or are they predominantly domestic?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a mix. I don't have the breakdown. We did make a commitment at the Regulatory Compliance Committee to provide more detail where it was available. One of our constraints is our reporting capability in terms of splitting those out.
If I had to guess, I would say that it's a mix. It's not only licensed premises, it's a mix of residential and licensed urban and rural cases. It's a real mix.
Okay, thank you. Any comments? If not, I'll put the resolution. All in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no, carried. So that brings us to the public excluded. I intend to take a 5-minute comfort break and come back at just after 3:30 to deal with the in-committee minutes, particularly the Russell landfill and the New Zealand board.
No, after our break.
We'll have to do it after. Okay, thanks. We're adjourned until 5 minutes. go into committee. Do I have a seconder, please?
Second.
Thank you. All in favour of one, please. All in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no, carried. much, Rachel. Do you want to?
Absolutely. Let me know when you're ready.
Thank you, everybody. Just before Rachel does the prayer, thank you very much for your participation. It's been useful.
Kia ora me kape, noi kape. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa puna mutu moana. Hei huarahi ma tātou te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou, tātou katoa. Hui e,
Thank you all. Drive safe.